The European Union is threatened and challenged like never before. In the 21st century, in our multiple crisis area in which we are living, we must take note that no single country of the European Union, no single member of the European Union alone is able to compete economically, to compete militarily against rising forces in the world or against the permanent superpowers we are working with since now more than 80 years. I'm speaking about rising forces like China or India. The permanent powers like the United States or Russia. Russia is until today the second nuclear army in the world. And the European Union is the richest and strongest single market in the world. And all parts of the world economically want to get access to our single market with their goods and services. But they are at the same time not only our partners, they are also our competitors, because China and the United States consider the single market as the European Union, not as we do it as an economic protection. They consider it as a competitor. And honestly, the Inflation Reduction Act, adopted by a democratic government, adopted by a democratic majority in the Senate and in the House of Representatives in Washington, is a program against the industry of the European Union. And this is a democratic partner of the European Union. I will not speak about those countries who have a state economy with state aid and could support their enterprises if they are not winning money-earning profits with state subsidies to compete us. This is China. And I could continue with a lot of examples why the European single market, our common market, is the best instrument if we combine our economic force in international trade agreements, and we, with our economic force, put conditions to our competitors, and not unilateral, they put conditions to us. This is an element which could strengthen us enormously. But if we will not combine our economic power with a political one, if we continue to be divided politically in 27 different opinions, 27 different strategies, we have no chance to tackle the challenges we are facing, especially politically, with China or with Russia or with the United States or with India or with the Asian Pact. Indonesia. Indonesia is the biggest member state of the ASEAN countries, 200 million inhabitants, average of growth between 8 and 12% every year. By the way, the biggest Muslim democracy in the world, 220 million citizens. My country, Germany, has 82 million inhabitants. India and China are neighbor countries. Both countries have 1.4 billion citizens, together 2.8 billion citizens. This is a third of world population in two neighbor countries. If these two neighbor countries, by the way, competitors, and India is, as we saw just recently, a functioning democracy, we should draw on our side, because China is for sure not a democracy. But if these two countries get in a conflict, will enter in a military conflict, which is not excluded, we have the next crisis in the world. How should a country like Luxembourg or Belgium or Slovenia or Austria, okay, Austria is a very specific case, the Austrians, okay, they tackle all challenges. or Portugal should compete with China or the United States. We Germans, we are the third economic power in the world. We are generating 35% of our GDP in export, but 67% of our export is going to this internal market of the European Union. We depend from a strong European Union more than ever other countries. The European Union and the member states of the European Union, also Romania, we must understand that we are a community of small countries. And some of them who have not yet understood that they are called small countries. If we will not cooperate and deepen our economic and political and military and security integration in the 21st century, we will lose. And therefore I continue to fight for the European integration against those from outside who want to destroy the European Union because by more ideological reasons, some of them by economic reasons, but Putin for sure by ideological reasons. Our concept of a modern, open-minded, diverse society looking to the future of our children and grandchildren in freedom and self-determination. Our idea of a transnational democracy based on the principles of mutual respect, on tolerance as a precondition, tolerance and mutual respect for a decent life together, for a life in dignity. This is for sure not the concept of the Russian Federation. They want to divide us, they want to destroy because their thinking is another one. Those who can give the orders, those who must follow. This is the concept of Russia. Our concept is respect, tolerance, and dignity. And therefore, I'm not surprised that the Russians finance those parties in our societies who are intolerant, respectless, and undecent. This is not surprisingly, and this is in your country the case, this is in my country the case. In a country like Germany, you can imagine that with the recent European election, a party with a list leader who is admiring the Waffen-SS. We have in Germany such a right-wing party that even the right-wingers in France and Italy don't want to work with them, which is in my eyes for Germany a signal of alert. In a country with the responsibility for the war crimes of the Second World War, with the Hitler regime, a party with a list leader for the European election, praising the SS shows we are living in dramatic times. We are living in a changing world where the certainty that we had overcome the dictatorships, that we had had a victory against this thinking of oppression, of extermination, of these dreams of grand empires submitting everything under the rule of power instead of the rule of law, under the rule of violence instead of respect. These people thinking in that way are generating more and more support in all member states of the European Union, and they are supported by the Chinese, they are supported by the Russians, and we should be honest, they are also supported by some elements of the democracy in the United States of America. The thinking of Donald Trump is not as far from this kind of political vision as it should normally be. Donald Trump is not respectful, and he is not tolerant, and honestly, privately, he is not a a decent man, but perhaps the next president of the United States. And what will happen if he makes a deal with Putin? We as Europeans should prepare to stick even more than ever together, because then we are alone. And then no single country of the European Union is strong enough, neither your country nor my country, and for sure not the smaller countries of the European Union. The Baltic countries, for example, are not able to defend their interest alone. Therefore, more than ever in the 21st century, European integration is, in my eyes, not only necessary, it's a question of survival for our democracies. And the survival of our democracies is the best instrument to grant to our children and grandchildren the same privileges we, in our lifetime, had the chance to live with. The enlargement of the European Union means nothing else than to integrate within that community of nations and countries who are not yet a member but who belong to Europe and to our idea. This is for the Western Balkan countries the same case as for Moldova. And sooner or later we must find a way how to enlarge the European Union so that these nations can become a member of our European family. But one thing is also clear. As long as the European Union will not be able to reform its treaties, and we continue especially on the principle of unanimity, every enlargement leads to a kind of paralysis of the European Union. This is our big historical contradiction, that you on one hand needs geopolitically that enlargement, but on the other side we are structurally with every enlargement increasing the possibility of decision making. And the problem is that for ordinary citizens, and therefore I will get back to the last question, a big community with a lot of different tendencies and parties and whatever, not delivering solutions is perceived as not necessary or as counterproductive. That means the European Union needs an entire reform. But that was the same debate we had 20 years ago. How we can enlarge if we have not yet reformed. It was before your country became a member of the European Union, the same debate. And then we started the process because we knew in that time that the Maastricht Treaty and the Amsterdam Treaty and the Nice Treaty was not enough for, in that time, 15, but for sure not enough for 25 or later 28 member states. And we called for a convention. The convention adopted a draft constitution. And the draft constitution failed. And then happened the following thing. Deepening before enlargement was the message. Then, because we saw that the convention lasted longer, the message was in parallel, enlargement and reform. Then the reform failed, but the enlargement happened. And this was exactly in the interest of those people who wanted to lead the European Union to a paralysis, but not by saying, look, this is the wrong way, by saying the enlargement was a mistake. The same people who cultivated the prejudices mentioned at the beginning were these people, like the United Kingdom Independence Party in the European Parliament, this Brexiteer party. No deepening, but enlargement. Then the enlargement came, led to a bigger blockage within the European Union, and they argued, look, this is an inefficient, superfluent thing. Therefore, it is a problem I have no solution for the time being. I would insist that we reform the European Union. But our problem is, and therefore I'm grateful that you mentioned it, we are living in times of war. such a academic debate as or academic observations I'm making now are not in no way helping the Moldovan citizens. And I will not speak about Serbia and the double game the Serbian president is playing the whole day. And I can't speak about Turkey, because if we enlarge the European Union with Ukraine, which is sooner or later necessary, what are we telling to the Turks? Waiting since more than 60 years that the European Union, the promise you will become a member of the European Union, will keep. And if we enlarge for Ukraine, but not for Turkey. And if in a foreseeable time Recep Tayyip Erdogan will be replaced by a CHP president, perhaps Imamoglu, the mayor of Istanbul, a pro-Western, open-minded party, which in no way a Muslim society, but a democratic society in a Muslim country. And then we tell them, no, it's not possible to join the European Union. When they argue, we are now returning to a political basis, sharing your principles. And we continue to say no. Therefore, I think we must convince people that we must reform the decision-making structures within the European Union. It means three key elements. No principle of unanimity in the Council. Secondly, not a commissioner for every country. A kind of European government. And third, a new hierarchy of competences. The European Union must not interfere in every detail in the single market. But the City Council of Bucharest could decide on which is concerning the climate change, whatever they want to decide. That question will not be solved in Bucharest. This is a question solved by cooperation of world regions. So a new hierarchy of competences. The European Union should focus on the important items. Our common currency, a common tax policy, a common economic investment strategy, international trade, defense and security, fight against organized crime, all the things the national country alone can't tackle. And perhaps to get a little bit away from this over-regulation within the single market, which is unpleasant for a lot of people. And then a majority vote in the parliament and in the council as the rule. Means, for example, for us Germans, that we are running the risk to be overruled in the council. Today, if Germany and France say in the council no, it's sort of difficult for all the other countries. But we must come to a situation which is not, as I often compare it to describe the situation in Brussels. Imagine that the United States of America in Washington had not a president, but the 50 governors would gather in Washington on the principle of unanimity. This is the style in which the European Union is organized, and therefore the precondition for enlargement is reform of the European Union, and that's urgent because we are living in dramatic times.